Hey guys, Blackhawk Cavern here. Welcome back to another dungeon ranking video. We're on the second to last one. So we've got another sort of 20 dungeons before we move on to the top 20, which I'm very excited to make. So the first one I've got on the list right after Organized Crypts is the Razorfin Crown. Razorfin Crown is just one of those straight up basic dungeons where it's pretty obvious what the creatures are doing if you've leveled through the Northern Barrens and the Southern Barrens. It looked pretty cool with it being like a labyrinth of vines and thorns. I just don't think the idea of it paid off very well. I do like the, again, this is similar to a lot of the dungeons. I like the variety of mobs. You've got the quill boars, you've got the bat cave, and then somewhat variants of the mobs with the crossing the platforms as the summoners are trying to control the creatures. You know, you've got a big fungal giant, you got a big rock giant, that sort of thing. Next one I've put up, I'm actually going to put these two together. This is the first time I'm going to put two dungeons together. Grimoire Depot, very awesome dungeon. You start off by infiltrating the train station, killing the first boss, which I'll admit wasn't the best first boss. Same with the last boss either. And then you hop down into the train, and then you fight everything while the train was moving. How freaking cool was that? I mean, the first time I heard that they were going to add this train into the world of Draenor, where it was going to have a moving train going through all of Draenor, and then they removed it, I was very sad about. On top of that, you had the second boss, which was really cool, how he just chain hooks across into this this turret, and then you get different benefits from this killing the certain types of ads. You know, you can do damage to the turret, you can do damage to other mobs, that sort of thing. So that was really cool, and it didn't feel tedious or boring, which I think says a lot. And the next one, More of Souls. Very similar to Grimoire Depot. You're infiltrating the dock, then you're starting out in the hull of the Naglfar, which is really cool, judging by the like the dungeon art when you load into the More of Souls. And then you're just fighting your way up while the boat is sailing under one of the most horrifying sea storms one could ever imagine. I think the Scythe boss really lets itself down though. The amount of visual bugs that went on in that fight across the many more of Soul runs I did in Legion was insane. I think I lost count of it, and I think that is why it is down on my list, because of those bugs. It was just very annoying dying to random stuff that you can't even see. And then I think I didn't mind the idea of the high reward, high risk, high reward thing in terms of pulling loads of trash, being able to AoE down, and saving yourself a ton of time. That's how sort of the Mythic Plus boosting went on very early in Legion, just so that the top guilds could farm more souls for artifact power. I think it was really dumb. I never did that. I might have done like a fair amount of runs just for AP, but not to the level, or even like a top 2000 Mythic Raider would do. So I didn't do that either. Now this next dungeon, now Preach did have a bit of difficulty saying the name of this dungeon, and it is called Gnomeregan. If you listen to the audio on the last boss, I think they definitely nailed the theme of Gnomeregan. It is supposed to be the ruins of a once great gnome city, kind of like Mechagon. However, I think it's safe to say that it kind of sucks that you only end up killing, I think, 2 out of the 5 bosses, or 3 if you include the spanner into the works in the forms of Engineer Omega Plug, which was an awesome addition to Gnomeregan. I think the Spider Tank boss definitely could have been bigger. I think lots of people who played back then would have got a lot more joy out of that boss in particular if he was significantly larger, like the Spider Tank in Ulduar in that first sort of area where the Flame Leviathan is. I think that would have been really cool, but maybe I'm asking too much. Going back to the Cataclysm now, definitely this dungeon had its ups and downs. This is Vortex Pinnacle. Its ups being that it's sort of like a Halls of Valor style dungeon where you're fighting in a city of heaven and you're doing all these sort of mini games in the dungeon, which were quite from the wind bridges to AoE bursting down the backs of stars, which was really cool. Did a lot of damage as well. Unfortunately, none of the bosses were even that fun, and I think the trash was really annoying, especially in the third part where it had all the CC immune fields or whatever they were. I think that was very annoying. Stormless Arcades, definitely better than Ragefire Chasm, I will admit. The feel of the dungeon is really good in the forms of the inmates when you come across, whether that be normal human criminals to gnolls who have been terrorizing Elwyn, including the infamous Hogger. I think he's a very good pick for a boss in this dungeon. The only downside of Stormless Arcades, which was very odd and very unrealistic, is that why on Azeroth are there fire elementals in the prison right in the belly of Stormwind? I mean, if they wanted to, they could burn a Stormwind slowly from the inside out, but whatever. Ivazhar. From the first glance, Ivazhar has a lot to take in when you first zone in. So you see this massive Naga army standing right before you, ready to crush your group into pieces. And you can see there's summoning something, which is really cool in the forms of the Wrath of Ivazhar. It does have its bad parts though. I like the idea of the weather in the forms of the wind that's pushing you around and all the lightning strikes. It feels very right. You know, the Naga has always had the power to control elements of the weather, sort of thing. However, it just made the serpent boss really fucking annoying because you're getting pushed by the wind while trying to avoid certain mechanics, whether it be the lightning or the poison puddles. That has killed so many people in Mythic Plus, myself included. It's just really, really bad. And the problem is that the Ivazhar, although he was the perfect warrior boss, his mechanics had to be either soloed or sacrificed on high levels just because it does so much damage, even though you were soaking the smash or something. It would just one-shot, or it would definitely one-shot at least 2 people on a decently high Mythic Plus level. I think that's what drags it down. The Wrath of Ivazhar looks really, really cool though. It's just the scaling of it and the idea of the mechanics didn't really pay off very well as a whole. Next up we've got the Scarlet Halls. Scarlet Halls is a bit of a weird one in the sense of combining the old Scarlet Armory and the library together and just made it one dungeon. Same with the Scarlet Monastery, although they combined the the graveyard and then the actual Scarlet Monastery. They kept some bits from the old versions, like the release the Hounds boss, the Ravager in the form of the Armsmaster Harlan. Obvious reference to Herod if you did that before. What was it, Mr. Pandaria? Yeah, it was pre-Mr. Pandaria. And the powerful sorcerer to replace Arcanist Doan would be Flameweaver Coigler. Its normal version was kind of meh, but the heroic version was, I think, far better and challenging. I remember wiping to Armsmaster Harlan because of how many times people got caught in the whirlwind, which is always funny to see happen because they would just slowly die. And that would normally be because the healer would also be one of those people getting caught in those whirlwinds. So it was a cool moment. I do like the treasury guys after that second boss where you'd kill them and then they'll drop piles of gold and such. I think that was a very neat addition. Now Tharian's Lair. Now Tharian's Lair is awesome. I always enjoyed the water slide down into the entrance and the dive bomb at the end. That never got old or boring, which is really, really good. Neither did the barrel ride after the first boss. I think the barrel ride they nailed because you could kill the mobs with fish. A bit unrealistic, even though it didn't count for like Mythic Plus percentage. It was still a cool idea. All the bosses were interesting, but well, they're not boring, let's put it that way. Some of the trash mobs were a pain in the ass. And no, I'm not talking about the drummers that spawn more ads. I'm talking about those fucking discus throwers that never wants to stay in melee and would always pull more stuff. And of course I love the sort of snail race that went on. I thought that was really funny. But no, I think overall, they did a really good job with Northarin's Lair. Same with the Hellfire Rampart. It's a really good beginning dungeon for the Burning Crusade. My big issue with it, however, is similar to the Motherlode, where there's a few places where trash can be pulled on accident. Which it was mainly in the gate, the Watchkeepers area. I can't remember how they were pulled, but maybe it was part of the skip that you would do. You would always hug the left side to prevent all that trash on the right, because it was time efficient, right? And then the other bad part is back in Wrath of the Lich King, no one ever really did Bazarudin, the Herald, which really sucks because they just finished it once Omor was defeated, which, yeah, that just really sucked. LBRS I've had very vague memories of. I remember that place being like a complete maze, and this was before they added maps to the dungeon. No one knew where to go. No one knew how to get to certain quest mobs, which was really annoying, which was back when, yeah, obviously they didn't have maps, but still a really cool dungeon. It might as well have just been a raid, just like UBRS, because it's really long and it has a wide variety of mobs, which certainly made it feel different from UBRS, which is why it is higher up on my list. And the idea of I never knew about the idea of summoning the bonus boss, Uruk. That you had to kill the first boss and then loot a spike that was found on the way to that boss. And then that's how you summon it. I thought that was a pretty cool idea. But then again, I think back then no one really knew how to summon it, which really sucked because that was one of the quests that you had to do in there. So I don't know, that's just me. Mana Tombs. I was surprised I didn't actually mention this before. Maybe I have, but Mana Tombs was one of those dungeons where just jam-packed of mobs that you don't normally fight, similar to the Sunken Temple with the Green Dragons. But this time you're fighting all the Ethereals, which are still very cool mobs. I think that's how they use the same model for the Ascendants and Cataclysm, which is why I really like the Ascendants. And of course they had an optional boss, which no one ever did because the requirements... I don't mind that you had to do like an entire quest chain to summon that boss, because I feel like he wasn't very important, but it is a cool thing to add in a dungeon where if you had the key, then you could go for it for some extra loot or something. But I think overall, I don't have much to say about the Mana Tombs, but I do very much like it. It's one of my favourite dungeons from the Burning Crusade. Zorgoroop. Zorgoroop was quite difficult, especially when doing some of the achievements, like on the first boss, having the 3 guardians alive when the boss dies, and then they obviously reused that achievement for several other bosses in the future. And it had some of the best voice acting at the time, which is really, really good. Like the Gate Watcher, and as well as Anubarak. The only downside to the dungeon was actually Anubarak himself. The whole fight was just boring. It's basically just DPS him, and then you wait 10 years or whatever until he comes back up, dodging slow-moving spikes, killing ads, and yeah, no, it's just not fun. I imagine a lot of people got tainted because of the that dungeon achievements, because I had no idea that watching Preacher's video that boss in particular had a ridiculous DPS requirement to get the achievement for. So I think it is down on my list because of that, but I still think it's a very good dungeon. I even don't mind the long dive into the water after Hadronox. Necrotic Wake. Necrotic Wake is a bit interesting. The area where you're fighting is really, really cool. It's like the ruins of the Temple of Courage. I did like the sort of interaction that was going on between Xandria, who's the Paragon of Courage, and then Irmath, which is the second boss. So it was cool to watch. It still is today. The first boss is probably one of the worst first bosses in the Shadowlands. The amount of times where my Mythic Plus groups disbands because people can't kill ads, or someone pulls an extra trash during the first boss fight itself is beyond belief. But the third and fourth boss are really, really cool. They got improved quite a bit, which is why it is higher up on my list. Especially the Surgeon boss. Scarlet Monastery, yeah. So I actually prefer the current version of Scarlet Monastery. I barely remember the old version, but I did like the old graveyard, having Blood Mage Thanos at the end, and of course the Dungeon Master V-Chess with this funny dialogue. It was always funny to hear it every time you go there. The current version is good too. They did reuse Thanos and Whitemane, even though they gave her bloody mass res, which is always funny to see it go off, which it never did because it just had a long channel. But if it did go off, you just see all these ads running in from nowhere, or mainly to the left if you did or did not look. But it was really funny just to see those ads wipe you out, just tear ass through your group because you could not kill it. If that mass res went off, it was a wipe. There was no way you're gonna kill the things. Although I think that was one of the achievements. You had to kill all the ads. So I don't even remember how we did it, but yeah. There was some very good touches to Scarlet Monastery, I believe. Next two I'm going to put together. Razorfin Downs. I'm judging the current version because if a lot of people don't notice, but it has gone through some changes. I think they changed it in BFA. The big thing about Razorfin Downs is just walking into that giant pile of bones with loads of little skeletons cheering on the big skeleton at the top of the pile, who is now dancing with a guitar, which is hilarious. It was just before it was just a big skeleton, and I think he was cheering as well or something. And then the build up in the form of the mountain climb to the last was just which was really cool. And you had the dragon to sort of help you and give you blessings and stuff. And then together with that is the Pit of Sauron. I think they nailed the Pit of Sauron. This dungeon was really hard back in Battle of Lich King. I only remember the Forge Master, which got easier with better gear, but the frost damage, the damage they dealt with the I can't remember the name of the mechanic, but it was just constant damage to people on either side of the boss. It just got insane if people didn't know what to do. And the second boss is really, really good. It made use of stack and spread mechanics, which is I don't think a lot of dungeon bosses do. Actually, same with the third boss. The fact that I think this is the first dungeon where you sort of need to read or sort of like research the mechanics to see how it's done, like line deciding the damage from the Forge Master, stacking or spreading from the mechanics on the second boss, and then realizing that if you have the brand on you, don't deal damage or don't heal. So I thought that was really, really good. The next one I have is Darkheart Thicket. Darkheart Thicket is really, really cool. I think that they got a lot of things right with the Darkheart Thicket. It looked really cool. Like, it wasn't just an infested sort of dungeon like it has been in a lot of the Legion dungeons. It did turn it did go in a different step or a different direction than a lot of the other dungeons. And I remember this was the first dungeon that I tanked on a 15 and timed it, because this is the dungeon that I got the Keystone Master achievement. So I just have good memories of Darkheart Thicket. So yeah, I just love that one. Templars Arthralis. I know people have bad memories with the Templars Arthralis, myself included, but looking back at it, this was a very cool dungeon with the addition of Arthralis herself, the healing boss. It was okay. Certainly not the best, but certainly not the worst. Then you had some stupid sand elemental boss, which just destroys pugs. But then it picks itself up again with the huge snake room and putting the orbs in the snake eyes, which never got boring. This is another one of those sort of tedious things that didn't get boring, even towards the end of the expansion, because it was just pad paradise. Just to see how much AoE you could do. I remember Twilight Devastation couldn't deal damage to all the mobs, because I think Twilight Devastation had a certain target cap or something. Like it would only damage like 20 mobs or something before it would stop dealing damage, and then it would just you're constantly dealing with, say, 50 plus snakes. It was really cool. It wasn't cool on Necrotic. That's what sort of drags it down a bit, which I think it could have been fixed, but whatever. Blackhawk Caverns. I love the Blackhawk Caverns. It really hit the nail in the coffin for a beginner dungeon of the Cataclysm. You had loads of cool bosses, like the second boss, managing the beams to make sure you didn't get 3 huge ads all at once, which was, I admit, was really fun to do. And doing the achievements in that dungeons was surprisingly difficult. It was very, very difficult because it was such a long fight on that last boss. Sorry, on the second boss. And then you had the whole like Raz Smash. You just see a huge fucking ogre brute coming in and wiping out all the big zealots, which were very hard to do. So I think that was a quite good bit of humor in that boss, and seeing the guy die at the end, which I'll admit was quite sad. But I think overall, Blackhawk Caverns was astounding, especially that the Corehound room where you got the big mother and the 3, so there's 4 little pups, so you could kill them too. I think you had to kill them, even though it was listed as a bonus boss. Next one. Now I think this is going to be a bit controversial. Zorgoroop was another really hard dungeon. I know I've said this a lot with all the Cataclysm dungeons were really hard, but this one was especially hard when it came out. I love the Broodlord Mandrake boss where you just levels up as he kills you, and then the ghosts come in and they sort of battle res you. I think the only thing that I didn't like about this dungeon was Zanzil. Zanzil is sort of the Cauldron Master. I think his mechanics were quite boring. I think it was a long fight as well. And then, what was the other boss? Oh yeah, the one I've got playing on screen, which is the, what is it called? The Cache of Madness, where you had to have archaeology to find, like, the out of order sort of relic. I think that just took way too long. You could probably have one person deal with it, and the rest of the dungeon just keep clearing trash. So I didn't really like that either. But it did have the addition of lots of little mini bosses as well. You had like the Fish Hulk, you got the Hive Queen, and you got this huge turtle that no one ever noticed, which is really, really strange. But overall, Zorgoroop I think is okay. Is a good dungeon. The Mckenna. I've probably been saying this dungeon wrong. I said the Mckenna. And lots of people say the Mckenna, but I've been saying it the Mckenna since Wrath of the Lich King, since I started. But this dungeon was cool, man. I mean, I think that first 2 mini bosses were harder than the actual bosses. I remember so many wipes we had to one of the gate watchers. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the one on the right. You had 2 bars who go to the left and right, each had a certain gatekeeper. I think it was the one on the right. But I think the bosses are really cool. I don't really like the last boss, however. But the other 2, like the first and second boss, are really, really cool as well. You got the second boss with the whole fire elementals going on, which is really, really difficult to manage. Even back in Wrath of the Lich King when people were still leveling up. And then you got the huge robot in forms of the first boss, which look really, really, really cool. Like, I haven't seen that version of a robot ever at that point, and I don't think it has been brought up since, which is really weird. And I think this is the last dungeon of the list before we move on to the top 20. It is our first mega dungeon. It's probably the worst mega dungeon is Mechagon. Mechagon had a lot going for it. I think the junkyard didn't really cut it for the dungeon as a whole, but it is really, really cool. You have multiple different paths you can go to. You're fighting things like trogs, gnomes on Mckenna bikes, which is really awesome. The guy that rides it has some super funny dialogue going on. And there's a big pile of slime which no one cares about. I mean, let's be real. His mechanics are interesting. You're having to free these sort of cleansy bots to help you deal with certain mechanics like the plague waves and the pull-in, which was cool. Then you had an awesome fourth boss where you're just hacking a pylon and such, which was really, really cool. And that was something that never got bored or never got boring, even on the hard mode. The hard mode of this dungeon, it was actually quite challenging. I remember we cleared hard mode the first time, and then the second time we got Hertzlocker just randomly, because I think none of us had died. And I think that's because we had such a good strategy for the last boss. I can't remember what it was at the time, but yeah, I just have a lot of, again, like a lot of the other dungeons, I have really good memories of this dungeon. And then you got another awesome boss in the form of the sort of like the twin mechs, which was super, super cool, especially doing the achievement, whatever that was called again. Cujo wasn't particularly great. And then you got the maze, which I'll admit was a bit tricky to navigate, but once you got the hang of it, it was okay. Then you got Spark Flux, which constantly spews out shit from spinning blades to oil spills to the rotating firelights, which got really annoying on high tyrannical keys, but it was a good sort of ready for raiding boss. And then you got the King Mechagon at the end, which was probably the best boss in there. I love the huge robot that comes in at the end. And if I'm mistaken, this might have been the first dungeon that they did where they added a hard mode to a dungeon. Like, they've added hard modes to raid, like Order and such. Unless if I'm wrong, unless if I'm mistaken, but I don't think they've ever added a hard mode to a dungeon before, like an actual full-on hard mode where it's not just one boss has hard mode. Oh yeah, that's my other complaint as well, is that I think all of the bosses should have had a hard mode. I think the Tussle Tonks didn't have one, and Spark Flux didn't have one. Although I think Spark Flux not having one was passable, because I mean, how else could they have made Spark Flux more difficult? Next one. Oh, actually, no, this is not the last one. It's Throne of the Tides. I love Throne of the Tides. I forgot this dungeon was even part of this video. The first time I was in Throne of the Tides, I was blown away. They really nailed the idea of an underwater dungeon, even though you weren't swimming or anything. This easily could have been what the raid was supposed to be back in, what was it, 4.2. They were going to release an underwater raid to pair with the Firelands, which is going to involve lots of swimming around, which I think Blizzard, to be fair, did not think people would have a big fondness for. But if they did like a raid version of Throne of the Tides back in 4.2, I think people would have been okay with it. But they never did that, which really hurts me. I would have loved to see that. It does have that skippable boss in the form of Mindbender Gersha, which no one ever did, which is an awesome boss. So that is my list, which got one more video to do, which is the top 20. The top 20 is going to be the most controversial picks that I'm probably going to do in any dungeon ranking video. So I can't wait to bring that to you guys, which should hopefully be very, very soon. So thank you guys a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.